Yeah, hi. Welcome everyone again. So, as we know, organizations everywhere are seeking to become their more flexible, more adaptive, and respond to the ever-changing market environments and shifting consumer behaviors. So we know agility and adaptability is the key to survive and thrive in these environments. This is the fact that and this is a fact, and we that's the very reason that we all are here today to just get some solutions to our struggles. So our very first speaker today, he is the lead author of the award-winning and best-selling book Sooner, Safer, Happier: Patterns and Anti-Patterns of Business Agility, of IT Revolution Press, November 2020. And also, he's the co-founder of Sooner, Safer, Happier Limited. He has been helping organizations across industry sectors to deliver better value, sooner, safer, and happier through high level of engagements, inclusion, and empowerment, and also helping foster a more humane and engaging world of work. He is business agility practitioner, thought leader, and a coach. He provides business leader with the blueprint for creating a world-class organization of the future. So let's learn from him with his topic, leading with outcomes. Without any further delay, let's all welcome Mrs. Jonathan Smart with a huge round of applause for him. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Geeta. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me here. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to talk about leading for outcomes, and obviously the title of today is Agile Leadership Day India. So leadership is the key word here. So I'm going to talk about leadership, leading for better outcomes. And so let's look at the importance of leadership. So first of all, Deepwater Horizon, the worst accidental oil spill in history. Half of workers surveyed reported fear of reprisal for reporting unsafe conditions. On the very day of the accident, managers were on board celebrating 7 years without a lost time incident. And there was a view that from the workers that drilling took priority over maintenance. And there was a view that you would be fired if you raised a safety concern. And so fake data was entered into the safety system with terrible consequences. If we then look at Columbia, so this is February 2003, the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. There was an engineer who tried 6 times to get an image of the wing and was repeatedly told no, and then finally was told this is a dead issue. So this was leaders not listening to other people. This was leaders not listening to engineers, not listening to people who had the information. So this is about poor leadership. The findings from the Columbia Accident Investigation Board report was that organizational culture had as much to do with this accident as foam did. The causes of the institutional failure responsible for Challenger, which was 17 years earlier in 1986, had not been fixed. So this is all about leadership, and behavior, specifically leadership behavior, is the biggest lever for better outcomes. So in terms of today being the Agile Leadership Day, leadership is by far and away the biggest lever for agility. It's the biggest lever for flexibility, for better outcomes. And my articulation of outcomes is better value, sooner, safer, and happier. Hence the book title, Sooner, Safer, Happier. And because what is agility? Agility is quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness. That's the outcomes of agility. And that's both agile and lean. And so the world of work has changed. We've gone from the age of oil and mass production. So the previous technology-led revolution was the age of oil and mass production. And the work was repetitive and the work was knowable. By the way, if you have a question while I'm talking, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the chat window. So these photos are from the Ford factory in Detroit. And actually, in the chat window, type in how many languages do you think were spoken in this Ford factory? How many languages? Okay, 4, 8, more than 6, none, none. Yeah, none's a good one. I like that. 15, 10, 50, 50. More than 50 languages were spoken in the Detroit factory. So more than 6 was quite an open answer, because that could have been 7 to infinity. Yeah, 50 languages were spoken, and it didn't matter. Why didn't it matter? Type your answers into the chat. Why didn't it matter that 50 languages were spoken? Okay, culture, well-established process culture, repetitive task, Rupa. They have same terminology to communicate, doing by seeing. Process is the same. So I think Rupa, Shri, and Shri, I'd say, are the closest, because they didn't need to speak to each other, because it was a repetitive task. Who was that? Was that, so process is the same, Shri, Rupa, repetitive task, because it was repetitive work and it was knowable. And top left, those people there, they're just making a wheel for the Ford Model T day in, day out. They didn't need to communicate, because they weren't collaborating. They didn't need to collaborate because the work was so specialized. This is division of labor. So basically, pretty much anybody could do it. Clearly know how it should be done and path ahead to do. Yes. Everything was set up, so they'll follow the same routine. Yes. So they didn't need to collaborate. And that's the world of work that we've come from. We've come from the age of oil and mass production. This actually goes back to 1771 and the very first technology revolution, which was in cotton mills in northern England. And that's where there was division of labor. There was specialization, and it was so specialized that it became child's play. 75% of the workers in the first big cotton mill, and I did a site visit a year ago, 75% of the workers in 1771 were children, because they had made the tasks so specialized, you didn't need to be an expert. It wasn't a craft anymore. That's where we've come from. And so we still see this way of working in knowledge work today. We still see silos of, in the context of technology, we see, for example, project management silo. We might see a business analysis silo. We might see an engineering silo. We might see a QA testing silo. We might see an operational silo. Our ways of working today with role-based silos and work passing are 250 years old. And the world has moved on. And obviously, we're in the age of digital, and work is unique and work is unknowable, and we need to collaborate. And that's because we have computers to do the repetitive tasks. Computers, we have robots on the assembly line. Just think of the Tesla assembly line with lots of red robots. We have computers which can automate knowledge work. Think of payments processing. Think of, in a bank, think of settlements. Think of customer onboarding. Think of applying for a bank account online. You know, it's all largely automated. So we have more computers to do the automatic work. So therefore, in organizations, humans, people, we are more and more spending our time on unique work, which is unknowable. This is why agility, because the domain of work is unknowable, we have to minimize time to learning. And we have to experiment, and we have to acknowledge that the world of work is more unknowable. So we don't want leadership behaviors where I want a Gantt chart I want to know what you're going to deliver, when you're going to deliver it, and exactly how much it's going to cost. The old way of working with a predictive Gantt chart is not fit for the future. It's not fit for, never mind the future, for today. So we have to collaborate more. We have to work together more. If any of you are familiar with Cynefin, Cynefin, I'm going to type it into the chat. Cynefin, there, I typed it into the chat. If you're familiar with that, you'll see the link here between repetitive work, unknowable work, complex, complicated. If you're not familiar with Cynefin, I'd recommend you do a bit of research. So culture is the biggest challenge to better ways of working. So this is from the 14th State of Agile report. And when you look at the top 5 impediments to better ways of working, 4 of them are culture. What is culture? Culture is behavior. It's incentive and behavior. So general organizational resistance to change, number 1. Number 2, not enough leadership participation. Number 3, organizational culture at odds with agile values. Number 4, inadequate management support. So this is all about leadership. This is about the tone from the top. And this is also about everybody as a leader. This is you as a leader. So my personal view of leadership, it's leaders at all levels in all roles. That's everybody as a leader. So you as a leader, it's about the culture that you create. So the anti-patterns are, number 1, do as I say, not as I do. Number 2, psychologically unsafe. Number 3, deterministic mindset. Number 4, leaders go first. Number 5, psychological safety. The patterns, and then emergent mindset. So I'm going to take a closer look at these. So the anti-pattern, do as I say, not as I do. The corresponding pattern is leaders lead. Leaders go first. The anti-pattern, psychologically unsafe. The corresponding pattern is to create psychological safety. The anti-pattern, deterministic mindset. The pattern is an emergent mindset. So I'm going to take a closer look at each of these now. And these are my view of the top 3 leadership anti-patterns and patterns. So first of all, what and who is a leader? So origins of the word lead is to guide on a journey. This is where the word comes from. This is the etymology of the word lead. And I love the fact that lead means to guide on a journey, because that means guiding from the front. It doesn't mean I'm going to sit here with my arms crossed while you go on a journey. Tell me when you get there. This is about going on the same journey as your team, as your colleagues, as your peers. And there's a difference between being a commander and being a leader. So a commander is a position. It's for a few. A commander orders. Obeying is mandatory. There is extrinsic motivation, and power is positional. So this is like commander in chief. This is like kind of, this is positional power. And then there's being a leader. And like I said, everybody can be a leader. A leader is a behavior and a mindset. And being a leader is for everybody, leaders at all levels. A leader listens, inspires, and informs. This is about having leadership without positional power. And a true leader, following is voluntary. And it's other people that make you a leader. It's not you making yourself a leader. It's other people that make you a leader because they follow you. So leadership is about creating a followership. And there's intrinsic motivation. So motivation comes from within for people. And as I said, power is given by followers. Power is not innate. So anybody can be a leader. For example, Greta Thunberg is an amazing leader, and she was still at school. She's incredible. and you might have seen she's been in the news recently, where she's been in Germany protesting at a coal mine. You might have seen that in the news. So anybody can be a leader. And the goal is not agile, lean, or DevOps. The goal is delivering better value, sooner, safer, happier. The goal is the outcomes. Just a quick thing on better value, sooner, safer, happier. Better is quality. Value is unique. It's why you're in business. Sooner is the heart of agile and lean. It's time to value. Safer is continuous compliance. Agile, not fragile. And happier is happier customers, colleagues, citizens, and climate. And for me, this is what agile and lean is all about. It's all about quality, value, time to value, safety, and happiness. So now let's go back to these anti-patterns. So the first anti-pattern, do as I say, not as I do. I've seen some leaders who have metaphorically had their arms crossed at the table, telling their teams, go on, transform, I dare you. And that's not very congruent. That's not good leadership behavior. And when I've seen leaders kind of dictate things, it normally doesn't end up well. I haven't seen a good outcome from that. And to quote Frederick Laloux, author of Reinventing Organizations, the level of consciousness of an organization cannot exceed the level of consciousness of its leader. So you will have a bubble of better ways of working, a bubble of agility, anchored at the top by the most senior leader in your organization, who is supporting better ways of working, supporting agility. And if that's not the group CEO, if that's not the executive committee, you will struggle to have genuine agility across your company. It has to come from the top table. Anti-pattern number 2 is psychologically unsafe. We've looked at a couple of examples already. We've looked at Deepwater Horizon, and we've looked at the space shuttle. Another example is Boeing. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Boeing problems that they've been having. 39% of employees surveyed perceived undue pressure. This is from the 737 MAX disasters. 29% of employees were concerned about the consequences of reporting undue pressure. There's a culture of concealment and a disturbing picture of cultural issues. And this was from the US House Committee on Transportation, March 2020. Since that report, Boeing were fined $2.5 billion by the US Department of Justice for hiding facts. So this was very poor leadership. And it's a really fascinating case study. I've written about it in the book, in Sooner, Safer, Happier. It's fascinating. It goes all the way back to when McDonnell Douglas and Boeing merged. And it was like a reverse takeover. And it was the culture from McDonnell Douglas, which was all about cost and schedule. Cost and schedule overtook safety. Ironically, sadly, the reason for their problems with the 737 MAX was because they were competing with Airbus and didn't want pilots to have to do the full training. So they were trying to spend less money. In the end, it cost them considerably more money. And sadly, tragically, the loss of many hundreds of lives as well. And that was due to poor leadership. Anti-pattern number 3 is a deterministic mindset. This is treating the future like it is predictable. The future is not predictable and it is not knowable. So the reason that there's an image here of a milestone is that, a deterministic mindset, people will use milestones in Gantt charts. The definition of success is, did we hit the milestone in the Gantt chart? That is not a definition of success. That's like trying to predict the future at the point of having learnt the least. And we've got no idea at all whether there's going to be a flooded road, whether there's going to be a storm, whether there's going to be problems on the journey. So achieving the milestone is not an indicator of outcome. We might have a terrible journey. We might get to that milestone and we might realize it's actually not the place we want to be. We actually want to be in another town. So this whole traditional mindset of Gantt charts with milestones and predicting the plan at the point of having learned the least does not fit today. How do you convince a leader who acts like a commander and thinks he leads instead of he commands? You can't convince anyone of anything. So I would watch out for the word convince to that question. I might come back to that actually, if there's time, I might come back to that. It's not easy. You can hold the mirror up, you can run surveys. It requires coaching. Corporate greed, Sanjay, yes, corporate greed, absolutely. But I think on that, how do you convince a leader he acts like a commander? I think 360, it requires leadership coaching. It requires 360s. It requires holding the mirror up. It requires feedback for the leader, because sometimes leaders are not aware that they're behaving like a commander. And so it's hard. It's really hard. It's not easy. And sometimes some leopards can't change their spots. There are some people who, who just can't change. So it really does require a lot of leadership from other leaders as well. So moving on, no one expects the agile imposition. Our two weapons are fear and surprise and ruthless efficiency. This is a quote from Monty Python. This is about imposing agile on teams. So this is another little bonus anti-pattern. This is about inflict rather than invite. If you inflict change upon people, command and control, top down, you will get an immune response reaction. You will get resistance. The harder you push against the system, the harder it pushes back, which is why watch out for the word convince. You've got to understand the selfish gene. So onto the patterns. So the first pattern is leaders lead, leaders go first. Role model the desired behavior, exhibit courage, exhibit vulnerability. Again, this is you as a leader. This is everybody as a leader. This is not pointing up them as a leader. And number two is psychological safety. As you're probably aware, Project Aristotle at Google, the number one determinant of high-performing teams is psychological safety. The ability to fail, the ability to say, I don't know, the ability to challenge someone who has more authority or more positional power, the ability for the first captain in an aeroplane to challenge the captain, the first officer, rather, to challenge the captain, the ability to say, I think we might be wrong. I think you might be wrong, like, with respect and, with much respect and kindness. I think we might be heading on the wrong path. So that's the number one determinant of high-performing teams. 3 steps from Amy Edmondson as to how to increase psychological safety. Number 1, set the stage. Number 2, invite participation. Number 3, respond positively. So set the stage. We want to increase our psychological safety, invite participation, blame-free retrospectives, blame-free culture. It's not about individuals, it's about the system. And then respond positively when something does go wrong. This is an example of intelligent failure. This is the Crew Dragon capsule. And this was SpaceX, where they deliberately blew up a Falcon 9 rocket to test the Crew Dragon escape capsule. So this is intelligent failure. And you want to have intelligent failure. Fail fast and often to succeed sooner. Actually, there's no such thing as failure because you're running experiments, because the type of work you're doing is unknowable. And there is no such thing as a failed experiment, just learning.
Jonathan,
number 3.
3 more minutes.
Thank you. Pattern number 3 is an emergent mindset. And so this is acknowledging that the future is not knowable. OKRs are very good for this, objectives and key results. If you write them well, they're a good way. Like the desired outcome is, we want to land on Mars, so you have a big aspirational goal. Key results: we've landed on the moon, we've landed on Mars. So an emergent mindset, have an outcome roadmap. What I have found works well is you have two roadmaps. You have an outcome roadmap, which is the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And you also separately, you have a delivery roadmap, a product roadmap. But the product roadmap is the one that's very, very agile. And, you know, you're not fixating on milestones in the delivery roadmap. That's the one that should be flexing all over the place in order to achieve the outcomes. The outcomes themselves won't change much. You know, increase revenue, increase market share, increase customer happiness, increase colleague happiness. They won't change much. And so you'll have quarterly and annual and 3-year outcome roadmaps, just-in-time refinement. But what you actually build and deliver should flex all over the place. And this is a quote from Emily, which I like, which is, what if we call them supporting lines instead of reporting lines? These are my direct reports, with these are the people I support. So this is about servant leadership. And this is about, you know, part of your narrative should be, dear colleagues, how can I help? My job as a leader is to get impediments out of your way so you can do your job. I am at your disposal. How can I help? Turn the org chart upside down. So recap, if you want better value sooner, safer, happier, leaders lead, foster psychological safety, and leverage emergence. And leadership is how you leave people feeling. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was amazing. Any questions for John? We have a couple of questions from Ashwin. What should we do within the organization to make a good culture?
Thank you, Ashwin, for that question. So the question is, well, first of all, what is culture? Culture is incentives that lead to behavior. Actually, Ashwin, do you want to come off mute and just ask your question verbally? And just give me any more background context?
Yeah, John. Actually, I want to know what should we do in an organization to make a good culture, like people to behave nicely with everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Ashwin. What is culture? Culture is incentive, implicit and explicit, which leads to behavior, and the behavior is the culture. So I think, Ashwin, this has to be the tone from the top. The more senior a leader, the bigger the shadow that is cast. And there's a thing called Western cultural typology, which Dr. Ron Westrom has written about this topic of leaders hire in the image of themselves, and they appraise and reward people in the image of themselves. So if you have a dictatorial command and control type leader, pretty quickly across the organization, you have command and control dictatorial type behavior. So I think the tone from the top is important, Ashwin. I think it's very important to articulate your behavioral guiding principles. So Amazon are very good at this with their 12 leadership principles. So to state very clearly, these are the behaviors that we expect to see: experimentation, autonomy, a focus on flow, respect for people, psychological safety. Articulate guiding principles, which are, and then incentivize those behaviors. So then make them part of the appraisal process, the recognition process, the hiring process, the, promotion, pay. Then make those behaviors part of the incentive process. And then I think you'll stand a good chance of heading in the right direction, Ashwin.
Yes, John. Thank you.
Sure.
John, Nikhil here. Just a thought. I mean, in the recent 10 years, a decade, we are seeing a lot of disruption in the market, right? It was always said that it is the technology which is causing it, but I always felt that it's a mindset that the from top down approach, when if they are ready to change, I don't feel that we'll be facing so many disruption in the market. Is it so, or it's the technology actually doing it?
It's, to my view, is that it's the every 50 to 60 years we have a new technology-led revolution, and that technology-led revolution leads to societal changes in society and also changes in ways of working. So I believe that it is triggered by the latest technological revolution. So just like in the past, we had factory systems for cotton. That was the first industrial revolution. Then we had steam, railways, the age of steel and heavy engineering, electricity, oil and mass production. And through each of these technology-led revolutions, we've had factory working, we've had subcontracting, we've had Taylorism, and then eventually we've had agile and lean. And so it is the technology-led revolution that leads to us humans, people, figuring out better ways of working suited to advances in the tools that we have. It's a little bit like going from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age, to the Iron Age, or the Iron Age to the Bronze Age. It's we have new tools, and those new tools lead to changes in society, as well as changes in ways of working. And then it's the survival of the fittest, because the companies that don't change, don't get as good outcomes.
We will go for one last question. There are too many questions flowing in. So John, you have too many answers to be given at your convenience. So what we will do is, in the interest of time, so John, we will share you the list of questions, maybe with some amount of time whenever you get to spend on it. Please do post us back and we will circulate it to all the audiences. Is that okay?
Sure.
So we can take one last good question, and a simple one. Are there any specific coaching techniques to be used or followed to embrace the culture and mindset of leaders?
So on that question, are there any specific coaching techniques to be used, followed to embrace the culture and mindset of leaders? I think back to what I said previously, I think the starting point is to be very clear on your principles, your guiding principles. For example, foster an environment of psychological safety. For example, experimentation. For example, outcomes over output. For example, high alignment and high autonomy. For example, I think I said experimentation already. Fast feedback loop. So normally what I will do is I'll come up with around about 10 guiding principles, very similar to the Amazon leadership principles, that kind of thing. And so specific coaching techniques to embrace culture and mindset of leaders. Once you've agreed that these are the guiding principles, you can always bring it back to first principles. And these are first principles. And these principles, values, if you like, they guide 1 million decisions and behavioral decisions every single day. They are the North Star for leadership behavior, and that's leaders at all levels. They're the North Star for behavior. And then the coaching technique is, if you're coaching particular leaders, you can do it. So what I will do is I'll do a 360 survey. If I'm coaching an individual, we'll get feedback from people around a leader and hold the mirror up. Self-assessment. Here's what people think. Let's look at the gap. You think you create a psychological safe environment, and this might not just be one individual. This might be a leadership team that's being coached. And the leadership team think they're creating a psychologically safe environment, but let's look what your team say. Look, they say that you don't. Do you want to work, dear leader, do you want to work on this gap? And you can't force, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It has to come from within. It has to be pull, not push. So it's not about convince. It's not about resistance. Those two words shouldn't enter your vocabulary. There's a gap here. Do you want to work on it? Yes or no? If you do, I'll help you.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much. Geeta?
All right.
So
So
what we will do is, thank you, John. Thanks so much for the talk. I think it was very insightful on the leadership part of the organization. Before we transition to the next speaker, we will just get into a Mentimeter part of it to understand the vibes with the people who and their organizations. Just a simple, quick question. I am posting it in the chat, the link to Mentimeter. You can open it either in your mobile or on your desktop or wherever, laptop, whichever you think is convenient, and to just answer one simple question. Any problem with Mentimeter, please let us know.
By process framework, do you mean what agile framework are we using?
It can be anything, agile, non-agile, scaling frameworks, whatever you want to put in, which the organization is following. Interesting to see somebody pasted none. I'll be sharing my screen for transparency. Only any of you are facing any issues there? Let me or Geeta know onto it. We'll be able to help you out. Scrum and Safe, Spotify, Hybrid. Even if in case an answer is posted, please do post from yourself. That way we can know the feel of it. Spotify, Agile, Scrum, Scrum and Safe. Focus on the outcomes. So which framework are we using to do that? I have to end it. So there are a lot of things coming in. If you're able to see my screen, the latest report which was published says around 56% focus or start using Scrum, or like basically they're following Scrum as one of the main process framework in their organization. There are some combinations as well, like Scrum and XP as a hybrid model. There are hybrid models with around 14% with multiple more methodologies coming into picture. Kanban also stands out with around 5%, and there are many others which are being practiced across various teams in the industry. So with that part, I will stop my screen share. I will hand it over back to Geeta for the next set of things. Thank you.